Land Planning and Sustainability Commission. Our agenda this evening starts with the call to order, items of interest from commissioners, director's report, followed by consent agenda, neighborhood contact code update project, where we'll have a work session and recommendation, followed by an additional work session on the residential infill project with the goal to adjourn at 7:30 or by 7:30. So first, any items of interest from commissioners? Seeing none, director's report.
Just one item tonight. The manufactured dwelling park code went through City Council last week and was approved. It was an emergency ordinance, unanimous support, and went into a.
We'll have a work session and recommendation, followed by an additional work session on the residential project with the goal to.
I'm coming through late.
Right, there's delay on the live stream.
So first, any items of interest from commissioners?
Could you put us on mute, please? The commissioners are on the phone.
One item tonight, the manufactured dwelling park.
This is going to be a very long meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah, if everything we say gets said over again.
So, Mike, could you put us on mute, please?
You might have to put him on mute.
Okay, when he talks to it. Okay, all right.
It'll still come through this phone.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so.
Okay, so approved unanimously by City Council, went into effect the next day. It's in effect now. As part of that hearing, we did not apply it to one manufactured dwelling park out near Delta Park.
I am on mute.
That's in an industrially zoned piece of land. Commissioner Saltzman requested that we bring back legislation to add that parcel to those covered by the new zoning code provisions, and so we're going to be bringing that back to you in October. We have to do additional findings against the loss of industrial land, since part of what that zoning package does is applies a new zone to the manufactured dwelling park, and in this case it's got industrial zoning.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. So on the neighborhood contact, consideration of the minutes from August 14th. Commissioners in favor?
Move.
We have a motion. Sorry. Thank you.
Second?
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so the minutes are approved. Proceed now to the neighborhood contact code update project. Have staff come up.
To have a
Hello, I'm Sarah Wright. You may remember me from such events as the previous hearing and briefing. So I just wanted to kind of refresh your memory about what the neighborhood contact code project is. The problems that we're really trying to address with this project are the reach of the neighborhood contact notice, the consistency and predictability of the way that the process unfolds, and what kinds of projects trigger it. So the key elements of the proposal are that all projects in most zones creating more than 10,000 square feet of new building would trigger the requirement, rather than the hodgepodge of thresholds that exists, which is different zones, different amounts. And when that process is triggered, what happens is that the applicant would post a sign and send an informational email or mail to the Neighborhood Association, District Coalition, and Business Association and School District for larger projects. If the project creates more than 25,000 square feet of new building, the applicant must ensure that the project is presented at a public meeting. BDS would support and encourage that this take place at a neighborhood association meeting, but the applicant is ultimately responsible for making sure the meeting happens. So those are kind of the key points. So you have a worksheet in front of you, and we're going to look at some of the amendments that we already have, and then some may, float up also in those categories as well. And Chair Schultz had a potential amendment that I think would go into the thresholds conversation. And you will notice that in your worksheet you have the thresholds at the top. I moved them to later on because I think it's pretty important before you start talking about the thresholds to understand exactly what would happen, what the process is for those projects once they trigger the process. So we're just going to, the only difference is that we're going to shift that threshold conversation to the end of the amendments conversation right before staff amendments.
Hey,
So-
did you want to start with the staff amendments or with the,
I have them at the end, but we could start with them if you'd prefer.
okay, we'll start with the meeting requirements, and that's fine. So do you want to present basically what the options are?
So the current meeting requirements are, you can see the existing text in here. The proposed amendment that came from Commissioner Smith would add a requirement that any meeting attendees who provide an email or postal address before the application, who provide an email or postal address would have to be added to the list of recipients. So that would mean that if you came to the meeting, you would then get a follow-up contact. And then there's, so we feel that so the staff support, we support in general the idea that meeting attendees should be included on the list. We have concerns about how, because this is all happening before the application is submitted and it's all happening where there's no city review of anything that's happening, it could open up just ambiguity about what kind of evidence is there that somebody signed up or not. It just opens up a lot of potential ambiguity that we have some concerns about. We would support the second part of the amendment, which provides more stipulation about where the meeting can be located. You heard testimony with concerns about the meeting being located like across the river from where the development project would be. And this addresses that by saying it has to be within the district boundaries, which wouldn't allow it to cross the river. And then the third part of this is addressing that question of conflicting with a neighborhood association meeting. And while we would certainly support and encourage applicants not to schedule their meeting at a time that would conflict, there's just a lot of potential ambiguity there again, where you might get into an argument, what does scheduled mean? Was the meeting scheduled 2 days in advance or 2 weeks in advance or a month in advance? There's just a lot of sort of ambiguous language in there that we just feel uncomfortable about. So that's where our concerns are arising.
You want to address it?
Yeah, if I could. So let me take them one by one. So in the first paragraph where I'm talking about the notification of changes developing from the meeting going to individual attendees, I just want to reference Comp Plan Policy 2.1, which is the first policy in the community participation chapter. And it talks about maintain partnerships and coordinate land use engagement with, and it lists a bunch of things, but number one is individual community members. So the language in the proposed draft basically privileges a bunch of institutions and doesn't do anything for individual community members. So I'm attempting to rectify that. And I appreciate sort of the evidentiary problems if you had to substantiate whether it did in fact happen or not. I mean, typically at a meeting like that, there's a sign-up list, and if you put your email address, then you get the follow-up materials. I don't think operationally, it's not a hard thing to do. I can understand that if somebody wanted to, to challenge a proceeding, that this would give them maybe a wedge to do that. But I think on the whole, the value of including everybody is the greater value for me. It sounds like there's no real disagreement with the second point, which is staying in the coalition boundaries. And on the third point, I'd point out that the Bureau, formerly known as ONI, does maintain a list of neighborhood association meetings. So in terms of knowing whether there's a conflict, I think operationally it's not hard to look at the ONI website or the Bureau of Community and Civic Life website and understand if there's a meeting. If the language by agreement with the neighborhood association is problematic, I'm happy to withdraw that particular clause. But I think on the whole, this is an improvement.
Any comments?
Yeah, I'm curious what you think of the staff's counter proposal on the first element of it. Do you think there's a friendly amendment or not? I guess that's
So that's specifically that
This seems like the amendment language is in any meeting attendees to provide an email or postal address, and they're suggesting just a in any meeting attendees, period. Am I getting that right? Or before?
That would be fine with me. Yeah, it's a practical matter. If you don't give an address, how are they going to send you the information? But,
Right. Okay. My general sense, I generally support the first two of these,
Mhm.
and the third one I'm not as inclined to support because I think the general tract of this code amendment is not to privilege institutions, and knowing that, you know, in Southeast there's Great Neighborhood Association, there's also Reach CDC, there's Human Solutions, Rose, Neighborhood House, and all these parts of the city who have different pulses, fingers on different pulses of communities. So although I like, I mean, I get the intent of it, but you could make that same argument with respect to all sorts of other neighborhood groups that meet. I actually live in the Cully Neighborhood Association, where uncomfortably the Cully Neighborhood Association meets at the same time as the housing activist group of Living Cully. It's been going on for years, and so I'm not sure which of those groups would I privilege if I were going to do this. So my instinct is to go with staff's recommendation on supporting the first two, but not the third on this.
I see.
Was that Kat?
Yep.
Okay. Noted.
So would it help if I move these separately? We just go through them one by one?
Sure.
Okay.
Is there any other additional discussion? Okay.
Okay, then let me move that we add in the first paragraph under 3 simply any meeting attendees and drop the provide email or postal address.
Say that. Are you saying in or out as terms?
I'm saying so we would add the phrase any meeting attendees so that they can get the information, but strike the requirement they provide an email or postal address, which is language staff wasn't comfortable with. So
Okay.
trying to do a version staff is comfortable with.
So discussion for 1 second. So the only pause I have here is whether it would be people that are requesting it, and this may create the problems with the email address issue or the address issue, but I'm thinking, do you have to send it to everybody if not everybody's asking for it? So the intent is just everybody.
So I was happy with my original language, but staff, I don't know.
Okay. So the intent, at this point, the intent was everybody who's there is supposed to get notice, correct?
So I'm struggling between my intent and staff's concern. So let me withdraw that, and I will just move my original language, any meeting attendee who provides an email address or postal address. It seems to me more workable.
Yeah, it does.
Okay, so show of hands. Oops, we had a second, sorry. Those in favor? Okay, so everyone here on the phone? Kat, were you able to follow that? Mike? Okay, we have the delay.
We're still listening to it.
We're getting the echo.
Well, we have enough for it to carry, so. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on that one.
So shall I move on to the second one? So in B, add the language and within the boundaries of the neighborhood coalition in which the proposed development is located.
That was Mike
so that's
saying
the
yes.
delayed.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's the
I
delay.
bet it is still the delay.
right.
I second that.
Okay, all in. Okay, thanks, Mike.
So it was moving my amendment to B 3B, as the language is in the worksheet.
Okay, so we had a second, and all in favor? Okay, everyone here is in favor of that one.
Okay, and in 3C, I'll move the addition and which does not conflict with the scheduled neighborhood association meeting and drop the unless clause. Oh, no, I keep the unless, let me say it again, which does not conflict with the scheduled neighborhood association meeting unless held in conjunction with a neighborhood association meeting, and drop the by agreement clause.
I'll second that.
Okay, show of hands. support? Okay, so we have 4 here, and that would be worst case 3. So are we comfortable moving? Okay.
So I want to do a process check because I'm going to be against
Okay.
that one. But I'm so used to doing the informal votes, straw votes, but this isn't residential info project now.
Right.
So on this one, do we actually have to take names and do amendments or
She's doing
not?
it. Oh,
Oh, you are? Okay.
I
All right.
assume.
Well, then I'll put a nay for that one. Thanks.
Oh, shoot. Do we need to call roll? Okay.
Okay, so we do the roll on the remainder of them? Okay.
Let's do that.
All right, so on 3, and I will just comment on this one since I had suggested it. This is just a very minor one where I'd suggested in the purpose statement there are references to responding to the community, and I was suggesting we say members of the community because it seemed consistent with this goal of recognizing that it's not one body, there are numerous people potentially participating. So that's the rationale behind that one.
Happily second that.
So call the roll. Oh, unless there's discussion.
Okay. Hauk, I don't know if he'll get it. All right. Larcell,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak, St. Martin, Rudd.
Yes,
I think Kat's on there too. But
she is.
all right, I'm gonna go with the 5 of you who are here, and that's fine. Okay.
So the next amendment is about the content of the sign, and this is Commissioner Spivak is proposing an amendment to require that the sign specify by right versus discretionary status of the project. And I think this is intended to kind of clarify what kind of project this is moving forward and how much ability to influence the project members of the public might have through the hearings process. So this amendment would add basically another item that would be included on the list of things that have to be on the sign. Information about whether proposed development is anticipated to use a by right development permitting process or a discretionary process. Staff have concerns about this because of the nature of development projects, especially if it's a smaller project that's being done perhaps by an inexperienced developer with less experience. They may not know whether it's going to be a discretionary or a by right project. And we have concerns about people running into trouble where they think it's going to be by right, but it turns out to require a discretionary process. So we just have concerns about that adding more confusion and process and potentially time to the development process. So that's where our concern is coming from.
Sure.
So I've talked more and listened and thought more about this item, and as much as I would love to get that indicated on a sign, I've become convinced that unless you're a land use wonk, it's not going to make a difference. And so I'm hoping if someone wants to champion this amendment, then they certainly can. But I'm not ready to keep championing it because my sense is that one is in other cities, huge amounts, a high percentage of projects are all discretionary. So you see the sign, you assume discretion, and you can weigh in meaningfully into the project. Portland's kind of an outlier in having so much that can be done by right. Same with other cities in the state of Oregon. But I think for the lay public walking by, they see a sign to introduce the discretion, introduce whether it's discretionary or by right, is just gonna be hard to convey. If they see a project over a certain number of square feet happening in the neighborhood, they're not gonna get that deep into what to come to a meeting expecting to be able to influence or not. So with that in mind, I'm okay not pushing for this one, but if others want to, by all means, go for it.
I will just say I know that the Bureau of Development Services shares that concern in making sure that the way that these processes unfold is clear in the sign. So I know that's something they're thinking a lot about how to communicate that.
This is Eric Kingstrom with BPS as well. I'm here to help answer questions and address issues. But on this particular one, I think we do agree with the idea of trying to educate the public more about this issue. So to the extent there's an ability to work that kind of information into the suggested material for those meetings and into subsequent notices once a land use review is, or once a permit has been applied for, especially if with Commissioner Smith, if more of this information is available online as the project moves through the process. As soon as we do know that it's a by right development, it would be good to figure out a way to advertise that appropriately and to provide more information about what that really means to the public. And it might not be in this particular code, but I think that's a shared goal.
Sure. Sorry. So when I'm looking at the sign, I see a little spot for a building permit. And is that not a thing on a building permit?
So that would be, this is actually an older draft of the sign that's been here now for months because nobody's taken it down. So in the most recent draft that we worked with BDS to create, that box is gone, but it is an indicator that it's potentially a place the Bureau of Development Services could use a sign like this or this sign as kind of a way to put up new information as it comes up to provide people with information about a project. But in the current draft, the box is gone.
If it were there, though, would by right be something designated on a building permit? Or that's somewhere else?
Would it say those words on it?
It could potentially be, because you would know that information at that step, but that's not currently how it's
right. But all the argument would be over by the time the permit was issued, right? So
yeah,
you could tell us after the fact.
Yeah.
Are there other?
I just want to say that I would like to not see it on there because I think you would have to have a whole education thing right on the sign. I'm a member of this commission and I didn't even know there was a distinction between these things until fairly recently. And so that's language that's very kind of coded and, the average person walking by is not going to know what that means.
So I'm not going to formally introduce this. If someone else wants to, they can.
So I had a couple of questions. So what happens if you get something wrong with the sign? So if somebody, for example, said it was by right and it wasn't,
Right.
what's the implication?
That would be a question in sort of interpretation. Would there need to be a new sign put up and then another 35 days would have to elapse before the application
But
could be submitted?
potentially we could address that, right?
Through code.
Right. Say these are procedural and not independent appeal rights type of language.
Typically, the way an appeal body deals with that is whether the error caused a fundamental prejudice in the outcome that took away someone's right to comment or something. And so a minor, the other thing that happens is the project can change between the time the sign is put up and the time the permit is issued. So that's another reason why the sign can ultimately be out of sync with reality. But in either case, in most instances, unless it was a massive misrepresentation, you probably wouldn't start the clock over again and make them go back. It would just be the fact that things changed or that they made a mistake, and the process would move on.
Okay. And if the ultimate version of the sign has a meeting info box, would it say no meeting required or no meeting to be held? So people would at least get that information?
Yeah.
Okay. So did anyone else want to take this one up? Okay. So time limit?
Yeah.
I'm going to jump in. I'm yanking this one too. Sorry, those who wanted to discuss it. I was under the misunderstanding that if it was a by right project, you could have a neighborhood contact and it would just be good forever. But I learned from staff that it's good for a year. So the land use process, if it's a discretionary process, there's already some timing in place on that. And on the by right process, if you're just going straight to building permit, then there already is a expiration to the meeting requirement. So I'm okay with that as written. Thanks.
Okay, so the next one is online access to information. Do you want to just start with that one, Chris?
Sure. So we have 3 different flavors of this. Let me try and point us towards one. The background is that Obviously, I feel strongly, I've expressed it during the comp plan and other places, that having good online information is important for community involvement, and that was lacking from the proposed draft. So I drafted an amendment that sort of had my view of how to insert that. Staff has redrafted that as choice B. I am good with the language in choice B with a couple of changes. One is I want to retain the addition to the purpose statement that says it makes the same information accessible online to interested community members. Again, the idea of privileging the whole community, not just the people who happen to walk by the sign. And I'd point out that there are equity issues with relying on the sign. If you're visually impaired, the sign isn't going to do you any good. So I think having it online provides a wealth of opportunities that don't exist otherwise. I take to heart the concern that was expressed in the memo from the Bureau directors that having the code be overly technical or overly specify the technology is not appropriate. So I want to change one line, which would be 3B and 4B, and the new language would read, the Bureau of Development Services must make the information required by subparagraph A3A available in an accessible online format and as an open data set. The Bureau will also provide a way for community members to subscribe to get proactive notification of new information. So I'm avoiding saying web page, I'm avoiding saying email subscription, I'm avoiding saying RSS feed. So take out all the technical language and basically say in what way we want the community to be able to access this information. So for example, accessible online format means that if somebody is visually disabled, they can use a screen reader to read whatever's on the web without saying web page, but get to the intent of make this accessible to as many people as possible. So again, basically I'm saying choice B with the reinsertion of the purpose statement line and with that change in sort of specifying the requirements for data access. I'll make that a motion.
And staff, do you want to explain your concerns about it?
So we have, so the primary concern with the original proposal and also with the revised is that it is, we just feel that this is something that shouldn't be in the zoning code and in sort of this purview, that it's a question of, we want to make sure that we're retaining the flexibility for BDS to change their technologies and just not have that specificity in there.
It might be appropriate if we asked if BDS or BTS would like to come up and talk about this too at this point.
And while they come up, I'll just argue from a parallel construction point of view that we're fine with saying the sign has to be every 600 feet and it has to be 10 feet from the property line. So we'll be really specific about the physical realization, but we want to be very vague about the online representation. And I want to define the community's expectations for both. So
I'm going to jump on it too, although we'll hear what staff says, is you used to say you have to use a certified letter. There's got to be some way of providing specificity about communication. And so I'm kind of okay with putting that in the zoning code as it was before.
Hi, good afternoon. Stacy Monroe with BDS, and we have Kevin with BTS. A letter was submitted from BTS from Jeff Bear. I'm assuming that your group got this after the last hearing. Kevin's here to speak to that. BDS's concerns with this are, as kind of echoed in the memo, is that we currently do not have any systems in place or resources to start accepting this information, disseminating it, and then getting it out to the community. POPS is a project that BDS is working on, and it has significant prioritized projects within it, and we'd have to reprioritize those projects in order to get this, in order to get our resources to support this system. So I don't know if Kevin wants to speak to what the priorities of the POPS system are. That might be helpful to let you know what kind of access to information that we're planning on providing. It's not as specific as this, but I believe there will be a public portal that will allow access to some information, but not as specific as what's being requested in this amendment.
Yes, hi, this is Kevin York, and that is correct. There's going to be a public portal component of this, the details of which are still being fleshed out. There's not a lot of detail on exactly how this would fit within what the needs and requirements are for this. And we would certainly want to be really thoughtful and deliberate in terms of what, solutioning and providing options that best meet what the needs and requirements are for this piece.
Okay, if I could ask a couple of questions. So I assume POPS is going to provide information in accessible online format of some kind?
That is the intent.
And POPS will be developed consistent with the city's open data ordinance?
As far as I know, yes, that is correct.
And it probably supports sending email to system users?
Yes, it does that as well.
All right, so I don't think I've specified anything that's wildly outside of what POPS is generally going to be capable of, and I don't want to tell you how to build POPS. That's furthest from my interest. And I guess I'd ask the other question to, I'm sorry, I don't remember your name, representative from BDS. How would a visually impaired person benefit from the existing proposed code, absent any of these amendments?
I don't have the answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Smith, one observation here is I think part of the issue with this is one of timing and resources, right? And the fact that we're in the middle of the POPS development. So one possible outcome of the amendment were it to pass is it could cause us to look at the effective date of this and push it out farther so that we can get the resources to make it work. And I think what BTS and BDS are saying is those resources aren't currently in place. And so that's just a factor in this discussion is, it could affect the implementation date of this.
There are also several architectural design elements that can be considered. There's a module within Amanda, the Trex system, that can potentially provide this sort of service. But in terms of the outreach, the notifications, having that sort of automated system that provides everything from SMS, notifications, text, messaging. There's so many solutions that are available for us to really consider instead of doing something, like like strictly email. There are solutions that we could potentially integrate within Amanda or look at something native to Amanda or consider solutions, again, that other bureaus within the city are using for this very successfully. It's just really, again, there hasn't been that element of review and assessment of what the potential technology solutions would be the best solutions to meet this need.
Right. And I don't want to try and tell you how to implement this. I take Eric's point, and I honestly think it would be better to not implement this until we can do a full solution rather than have half a solution. So I guess it doesn't bother me if the effective date slides out a little bit to deliver the right thing to the community.
And I guess the one last note is there certainly is not a technology impediment to doing this. It's just a matter of how to do it, the best way to do this. And that really takes, again, that level of assessment and looking at the available options available to us.
Could someone speak to the timing issues? Because I can hear the idea of this going a little later, but if this is basically asking, this amendment is asking BDS to do something. If the project takes 3 months, maybe I don't know what it is, but it actually takes 15 months. I mean, is the whole project set? I mean, I'm just trying to, if someone could talk us through what happens in scenario planning.
Just from the legislative angle, assuming you all made a recommendation today or in the next meeting, this would move on to City Council and probably could have an effective date in early 2019. We may try and line it up with some other things that you're also still considering, like RIP and Better Housing by Design. But so that's a separate question. But if right now my understanding, and you guys can correct me, but there's a moratorium on making a bunch of permitting changes in the computer system right now as they try and get this new system online. So we have to be in the queue after that stuff is resolved, after the basic system is done, to add new functionalities. And so you guys had indicated that the POPS is mid-2019 target?
Yes, the current schedule looks at release 0 around March timeframe. And then again, there's plenty of new features to look at for the release 2. Potentially this could be one of those, depending on priorities.
So it could be mid-2019 before we could start to figure this out, and then so that could push the effective date out into later 2019 or further, which again is, as Commissioner Smith mentioned, maybe that's an okay trade-off, but you may be facing the same question with RIP and Better Housing by Design to the extent that they cause permitting system changes as well.
And I just want to point out there is choice C, the staff sort of preferred way to get in the direction of this, though not to the specificity, just includes a requirement that the applicant must contact the Bureau of Development Services. So really just adding the Bureau of Development Services to the list of entities that get the notification so that they would have the information. And then a sentence saying the Bureau of Development Services will electronically publish the submitted information. And that creates a space for future solutions to be implemented.
Well, how does that not have the same problem? If there's a requirement that the Bureau implement something, if you don't have the IT resources to do it, doesn't that create exactly the same issue?
It does. It does, and it sets a false expectation that staff is doing something with that information when we don't have the resources to publish it anywhere.
Right.
Any more questions or comments?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering, does that mean that do I understand this right? If we specify this, then it could stop everything in its tracks. If we don't specify it, what is what does that mean? Does that mean that this will never happen? How do we, so what, is that what that means? The second, as I think I understand the first, if we do it, you're saying that it will have some implications in terms of when this whole project gets implemented. But if we don't specify it, this sounds like a good idea. And so does that mean it's just kind of up to the discretion of whether this will actually take place?
Can I take that one?
Maybe there's a way we could.
That makes sense.
Can we propose an amendment? Propose that we adopt this code update recommended to City Council and have this one element of the code update only be triggered when POPs is ready. So basically, the whole zoning codes as whatever we recommend, City Council approves it, except for the online access clause gets dropped in.
Yeah, it's technically feasible to have a separate effective date for one piece of it. That may be overly complex, but it's technically possible.
POPs has been delayed significantly already, correct? So I wonder, how realistic is the mid or the first quarter 2019 date?
Well, the current, and I'm new to the project. I'm 3 weeks in, so I'm newly minted. So I was happy to be selected to come and sit here before you today. But the current schedule is on track. Now, certainly there were delays in previous aspects of the project, but again, things can change. But as it is right now, and it's been well into work, actual tangible work on the project. It's still trending green and or amber on some components, but it is for the most part on schedule. So there's nothing to say that there aren't concerns at this point in terms of the schedule sliding.
I would add to your second question about if it's not in the code, or maybe it was the Commissioner Larcell's question, but absent this code amendment, BPS and BDS had been talking about this issue on our own about how could we make this more accessible electronically, and that's, I think, so absent the amendment, we would still be having that conversation. It may take longer.
Yeah, if I could offer a suggestion, there is the other approach to just include in your recommendation a recommendation to City Council that by resolution or some action of City Council, they put this in the programming for get it in the queue for a programming element to be added to POPs. That avoids having to concoct a separate effective date. It loses the ability, it loses the perceived or maybe real leverage of having it in the code. But even if it's in the code with a separate effective date, if POPs runs into issues or resources are constrained, it could just keep getting bumped out. It'll just require a separate action. But the message from City Council to all the agencies implementing this new system could be addressed pretty directly if we want to do it that way. Keep the code simple, get City Council to do by resolution a request to include this. Come back at it.
And I think we had discussed that with Commissioner Smith about whether this could be something done through your letter instead of in the code. And I think he prefers to have it in the code from a leverage perspective to make.
Right. I want the community's expectations for how the data is accessed in the code equally to how it is physically. So,
Teresa?
Well, I have to say I support Commissioner Smith's perspective in that, one, you know, if you have it in the code, then it becomes a thing that can actually be a budget line item that hopefully will get worked on and allocated resources. And two, it sets the standard for what the community expects, which a letter does for 5 minutes, but then it's gone. So, I mean, it just all really depends on what it is we're trying to do with this, and it is more than just this particular project. So perhaps it needs its own life. I don't know.
Okay, are people ready to take a vote?
Which are we going to vote on?
Do you want to propose a split like Eric recommended?
I'd rather try the motion straight up first.
And then what would happen, just for my education, if we passed it without a split, does the setting of the effective date become outside of our control and end up might being a year from now?
I don't know, how would staff take it to council with the amendment were adopted?
I don't know that we've ever negotiated an effective date with the commission, but we typically assess that based on a whole bunch of factors in terms of what else is going through and try and line up other projects with it, and these kind of technical issues with whether BDS is able to implement is one consideration. So yeah, we would, if it doesn't have an explicit separation clause, we would just evaluate that when we got to council and figure out what's feasible and pick a date.
And I'm comfortable with that process. So do I need to restate the amendment? Would that be helpful?
Yes, please.
Okay, so it is on page 3. It's choice B with a couple of addition substitutions. The first is that from choice A, the purpose statement language is still included. It makes the same information accessible online to interested community members. And then within choice B, item 3B and 4B are replaced with less technical language that sets the expectation of users without naming technologies. And I can repeat that if you want it, but that's the intent.
Is there a second?
It was already seconded, I think, by Eli.
Okay. So call the roll, please.
I'm just going to call those of you who are here. Larcell.
Yes.
Smith.
Yes.
Spivak.
Yes.
St. Martin. Yes. Rudd.
Yes.
And Commissioner. Oh, Commissioner Houck, yes by text.
Thank you.
Glad we're using technology to make this.
I guess I'd like to request in our letter to City Council that if the effective date is going to drag beyond, I'm making this up, May of next year, I'd like to hear about it. I'm not sure how to say this, but I do worry. I don't like the idea of tying a project with a lot of good things into it to something which can spiral out of control and never hear about it later. So in my development world, I try and avoid that, and I worry about with technology more than with development sometimes. So I'm not sure how best to frame it, but some way to let City Council know that the intent is not to let this project get all the other parts of this code update be held hostage to a technology process.
One suggestion is, we talked about this with the BDS director, is that it may be appropriate sometime in early 2019 to actually give them an opportunity on your agenda for them to brief you on the rollout and the features of the new POPs system, just so you're kind of in the loop with that, and that might be one venue to hear about that if there's going to be a delay.
Okay. So move on to the staff amendments.
I actually want to just, so we moved the thresholds to here.
Oh,
so
sorry.
So now that we have the process kind of nailed down, I just wanted to revisit the question of thresholds. Commissioner Smith asked that we just bring this up because it was one of the things that we heard a lot of testimony about. There was testimony asking that the thresholds that would trigger the sign and also the meeting, that they be moved up, and some people wanted them moved down or sideways. So that's definitely a conversation we wanted to make sure that you have the opportunity to have. So what you have in front of you is a very exciting spreadsheet with numbers from permits that were finaled or close to final 2015 to 2017, just to give you a sense of where they fall in these square footage categories. So with the current proposal, those projects under 10,000 square feet, and we did set a floor here of 1,000 square feet, so stuff smaller than that isn't included in this table.
So if you wanted to trigger a massive number of meetings, you could set the threshold at 1,000.
Or 0, I suppose. So you'll see one of the things you will notice is that a lot of the permits are for small projects under 5,000 square feet. So. So projects between 10,000 and 25,000 would trigger a notice, so a sign, an email, or letter. Projects above 25,000 would trigger a notice and a meeting under the current proposal.
Is there any discussion? Go ahead, Chris.
Well, I want to thank Sarah for gathering this data, but based on it, I see no reason to adjust from the 10 and 25 thresholds that are in the proposal.
Other thoughts? Okay, so do we have a motion?
I don't think we need a motion because we're not changing anything.
All right. So you're clear on that one?
I know that Chair Schultz had raised a question about this with staff, so I don't know if she has an amendment for this or.
You know, I just texted her. Oh, yes, we're getting messages. Hold on. Commissioner.
Yes.
Yes.
So my amendment is to limit meetings to only occur when there's discretionary review. Staff has raised concerns about being able to describe discretionary review, and I'll let them explain their concerns. I'm not doing it through this phone. I think that can be handled and mitigated, and I've explained to them why I think that or how I think that. But if they find discretionary too broad, then I would say limit them to type 3. And the reason I'm proposing this is because I think the meetings then get quite complicated when things are by right and people understanding what it is, what kind of process they're actually participating in.
So in a conversation with the commissioner, from staff's perspective, we had raised the question, again, parallel to the by right discussion that we talked about earlier, is that we may not know if the threshold for needing the meeting is whether you need a type 3. You may not know that at that stage, so it caused some complexity in our mind. The larger, maybe philosophical issue is that the whole purpose of early neighborhood contact originally was put in the code to handle projects that didn't have hearings, so that the public had a way to get information earlier about those projects. And so requiring this only for projects that have hearings already would be a pretty fundamental shift from the original purpose of neighborhood contact, in terms of its purpose serving to inform people about and give early warning, even for projects that are by right. So just potentially a philosophical difference about what the purpose of the project is.
So my feedback on that would be we're requiring the sign. I'm supportive of the sign. I think that gives the neighborhood notice. I think what's frustrating for both parties, the neighborhood and development team included, is okay, we've had a meeting and now nothing changes because I'm allowed to do this by right. And an example that I can give that I've had to do over and over again with the neighborhood is there's no parking required. Developer's not going to require parking. They sit there and everybody argues about providing parking. And so it's a very frustrating situation for both the neighborhoods as well as the development team. So it's just one example and why I'm like, I think we're setting up a situation that I think it's great to inform the neighborhoods about what's happening. And when a project then is discretionary, yeah, let's talk about what's happening here. So that's the whole reason we have the overlays in place for those who've got design review. And I guess I disagree with staff. I think anybody going through a design review or a type 3 process, there's so much information you're going to learn in the pre-app that you're going to know that you've got to meet with the neighborhood before you actually hit the design review process.
Eli?
Yeah. I get that there's situations where a meeting just becomes a bomb throwing exercise and not constructive. But we also heard examples where just having the meeting, even on by right projects, things do change just from the fact that the right people are in the right room together. And so by getting rid of by not having a meeting requirement for situations where it's just going to be a fight about parking on a by right project, we also get rid of the opportunity to have meetings where ideas might come up, even on a by right project, that influence change to the project in a constructive direction. So I guess tend to be okay. Excuse me. I tend to be okay requiring the meeting, whether it's by right or discretionary, just for the opportunity that there might be some improvement on projects, recognizing that there may also be times where the meetings are not constructive. Excuse me.
Chris?
I'll essentially echo Eli's sentiments. I feel exactly the same way.
Other comments? Kat, did you have anything to add? Okay. So, Kat, did you want to make that as an amendment and see if there's a second, or? Is she texting you?
I'm checking.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I guess I did hear Eli and I did hear Chris's second. I guess I still, and I don't know, I can't see the room whether I've got enough people in support or not, but I guess the only other thing I'd add to my argument is that we've added a lot of process to getting things developed in Portland, and it's just one more thing that we're adding that creates a hurdle to development in a time when we're trying to get some projects built and housing built, and this is just one more thing that people go, I'm tired of developing in Portland. So that's another one of my concerns.
So do we have an amendment from Kat at this point? No? Is that?
I don't. Kat, so the question is, are you want to propose an amendment that we can seek a second? Maybe we should just treat it as an amendment.
Sure. Sure. I guess my amendment is to limit meetings being required to type 3s and only.
With the same threshold of 25,000, but it would just be for
type 3s.
Type 3s.
Is there a second? Okay, there's not a second. So that dies. Okay.
Right.
Okay. Right. And we weren't changing the thresholds otherwise, so we're good.
So the last item is just the package of staff amendments. And this is primarily corrections to do a better job of being consistent with the language in the code. Really just improving specificity. There's one item about defining when construction begins, where questions were raised about how do you define when construction begins. So we're specifying that the issuance of the building permit is actually the trigger for when the sign can be removed. but so there's just a packet of them. So does anybody, it's just a question, I guess, of whether you want to pull any of those or adopt them as a package, or.
I will move the staff amendments as a package.
Discussion? No. So can you call the roll on that, Julie?
Hauk, if you're here. Larcel,
Yes.
Schultz, Smith,
Yes.
Spivak, St. Martin, Rudd.
Yes. Okay, so that addresses everything for the neighborhood contact. No, do we need to vote on the primary thing if we just went through the amendments?
Yeah, I think you would then.
Right. So I'll move that we recommend the neighborhood contact proposal to council as amended this evening.
Aye.
Right, okay. Yeah, he was saying yes for a
Prior
prior.
Previous.
So could you call the roll, please, Julie?
Yes. All right. Should I call Mike first on this one too?
Sure.
Maybe he'll chime in. Hauk, Larcel,
Yes.
Schultz,
No.
Smith,
Yes.
Spivak, St. Martin, Rudd.
Yes. Okay,
Yay.
so is that everything you need?
And we'll be back in touch about the
Letter?
letter and work on that.
Great, thank you. Okay. So, do people need a break, or can we move along? Okay.
We can roll on.
Okay, let's move along to the residential infill project.
These for the commission? Yeah. Oh, just go ahead.
You got one?
Oh, big one.
Oh, you're going to let me talk.
Welcome back.
Ah, thank you. Well, the excitement in the room is palpable. We are rounding the final turn here. So I'm Morgan Tracy, the project manager. With me is Sandra Wood, supervising planner for the residential infill project. Tonight we are going to focus on cottage clusters, but we have a few amendments to consider prior to that. So we'll work through those and then we'll get to the cottage cluster topic. So some of these slides will look familiar for the folks that are following along at home. Our worksheet that we'll be working off of is available on the project website at that address on our documents and resources page. A little reminder about the Planning and Sustainability Commission goals for this project that we talked about a while back. So equitable benefits and costs, and distributing those benefits and costs more equitably, providing for increased housing options and less expensive housing options. And there are a number of other attributes and goals that we are trying to balance with this project. So for tonight's rather short agenda, we have about an hour. So we are planning on talking about small flag lots in the R5 zone, sort of following up on a conversation that you had 2 weeks ago, talking about narrow lots, and following that by an amendment related to tree preservation, looking at driveway spacing, and then we'll get to the cottage cluster topic.
If I could interrupt for a minute, because I told Katie to throw something at me and she kindly didn't, so that I'd remember something and I proceeded to forget it. So Katie did want to mention something at the onset about residential infill.
Great.
Yes, I was so impressed with the letter that that this commission is going to be sending about the Southwest Corridor Equitable Housing Strategy. Not sure if we voted on it yet, but it's a really wonderful letter. I got it in my email a couple of or yesterday, I think. And as I was reading through it, I felt like there were things in it that I would so wish for East Portland. And of course, there's always these echoes of the project that you happen to be thinking about right now, RIP. And so I know it, like on the, let me just go through it really quickly. On the first page, the second paragraph is really saying that that City Council needs to stand firm and not even do the project unless a housing strategy is in place. And I mean, I tried to get that through this council, and you guys decided not to do it that way. But I'm noticed that, and then but there are other places where I feel like this council could do more in terms of rolling out the RIP in East Portland. And they have, within the letter, there are several bulletized lists. And let me just go through some of the ones that where you guys were making, where we're going to be making recommendations. And there could be a way, and I want this body to be thinking about ways that we could be recommending to City Council that they do this. And like, for example, on the second page, make a one-time investment to fund the CBO's request to form a community preservation work group. And this is about maintaining the communities that are in the Southwest Corridor. And I'd like to see something like that for East Portland. Number two is make an ongoing annual investment about current levels into anti-displacement services for low-income housing at risk of development. And in this case, they're mentioning Southwest Barber and Southeast Division. But I really think it should be for all of East Portland, and especially those areas that were designated by staff as areas that were at risk for displacement. And then going on to the next page, some things don't really translate directly. But number 4 is maybe a little bit of a wild idea, but it was to form a Southwest Corridor urban renewal area with strong guardrails. Now, I don't know if it's probably too small a project or too big of an area, but it seems to me that some kind of urban renewal or some kind of way to reinvest in East Portland would be reinvest some of the gains that will be made by having this, the RIP come through East Portland. And then number 5, follow through on developing proposals and funding for new tenant protections. That is a very straightforward request. And I would think that if something was being developed for Southwest Corridor, it could also be developed for East Portland. Continuing on that page, there's a whole section on monitoring and championing the housing strategy and light rail project with an eye towards equitable outcomes for low-income households and communities of color. And number 2 on there, work with BHB and the Community Preservation Work Group to co-develop an annual accountability report. If nothing else, I really would like an accountability report that would go with the RIP and that would tell us what kinds of impact it was having. Although I hate the idea of a I told you so, report. I'd rather see some kind of support for households in East Portland as the RIP goes through. I'm not. I think I would need help from some of the members of this commission that have been on here longer and have a good idea of what the best way to attach some of these things are. But I'd really like to see I often feel like in East Portland, the projects are smaller and the dollars attached are smaller, and we don't end up with the sort of leverage to be able to request these kinds of issues. And when I read about Southwest Corridor, I am impressed that we can ask for those things, and I would like to be able to ask for those things for East Portland. So, any reaction from fellow commissioners?
I think we had the discussion before that about there possibly being two letters, one being the more streamlined RIT letter, and then a second one that addressed some of the broader issues. So maybe this comes into the broader letter. Joe?
Well, and just the list that Katie just read is a list that of things that we know are interests and potential needs and that could benefit East Portland with or without RIP. So, I mean, that's a list that's relevant, period. So, and is in discussions with some of the other projects we have out there. One of the big differences is the broad spread sort of application of residential infill project compared to the $2 billion or the sort of concentrated investment. But the programs that needs those kind of recommendations are, I know, in active discussion. They all face the same problem of resources.
Mm-hmm. And also these things would be good items for the plan that we're asking for East Portland, and these kinds of discussions and recommendations would go a long ways. That would be a good place for those discussions to happen.
If I could. Yeah, I think, Katie, sort of what I hear there is a request for a housing plan for East Portland, right?
Housing, transportation, and
Yeah, and I think it's not just RIP. Better Housing by Design is going to have similar effects probably, so we probably need to craft a bigger umbrella for that. But I'd be happy to talk with you offline at some point about that.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Michelle.
Sure. Okay, so we'll move on to where you started to try and go before.
Okay. Well, thanks for sharing that, Commissioner Larsell. That's a good observation, especially as we start rounding the corner and getting closer to a conclusion on which direction we're taking this project. So appreciate that. For the first topic here, I'm going to have Sandra walk us through this this proposed potential amendment because she was involved in the conversation 2 weeks ago and I was absent for that. So,
yeah. So this is the first item on your worksheet today, which is 11.4. And if you recall, in our last discussion, we showed both of these drawings. You must have some animation there. Where we were talking about the R2.5 zone, and both of these, or all four of these lot configurations, would be allowed in the R2.5 zone. So attached houses, each on their own lot, and then we had proposed that a small flag lot also be allowed. So that lot line, on the dashed lot line, could be confirmed, and a property line adjustment could take place as long as there was an existing house. That brown house with the real roof is an existing house, and it would allow for the detached flag lot to be created in the back. So we have kind of three questions around this. What we talked about last time was that this was should be allowed in the R2.5, and that's great. And Commissioner Spivak had an amendment that the back house on the flag lot should not be limited to, you can just keep it here, should not be limited to the 20-foot height limit that staff proposed. And the commission had a pretty split vote, but it passed that the house on the flag lot should be able to be a full 35 feet high in the R2.5 zone. So that was the end of the conversation about the R2.5 zone. And then I think I muddled you up by asking, so what are we doing about the R5 zone? And I just rewatched the video a few minutes ago because I was refreshing my memory what the question was here. So the question here is, since you are allowing this flag lot configuration in the R2.5 zone, do we also want to allow it in the R5 zone where the pre-existing lots exist? Because earlier that evening on August 14th, you had voted to not rezone some of the R5 lots, but to keep them R5 zone, but to allow that lot line to be dropped in like the 2 lots on the left. So my question to you is, do you want to make the R5 lots that have the pre-existing lots have the same development rights as the R2.5 lots? So how that plays out is the lot configuration. They could do this flag lot configuration, and then we had the question about the height of the rear house also.
Step in, because I want to translate, not say exactly what you said. I'm not saying you get the same development rights as you get the R2.5 lot. R2.5 lets you build more massive structures, taller front and back. What I'm proposing is that in the R5 situation, you can build exactly what R5 already allows, but you're allowed to bend the property line with the flag lot so that the structure in the back, which in the R5 zone can't be more than 20 feet tall. There's already zoning code talking about the height of the detached accessory structure in an R5 zone is capped in height. I say keep that cap in height, but let someone use the mini flag tool to create a separate parcel. So my intent here is not to allow you to build any bigger or any less in the R2.5 zone or the R5 zone. Let you build exactly what you could build on that site. But if you've got a historic line there, allow someone to do a bend the line around the front house as an incentive to preserve it. And I think that in both these code provisions, the real intent of it is to make it easier to save the existing house out front.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just a mechanism to allow you to save the existing house out front. But if it's in the R2.5 zone, you could put a regular full-size house in the back because that's what the R2.5 zone allows. You can have you could take the house down and build 2 big houses in the front. But it allows you alternate site layout, get the same massing, but you can build a house in the back. In the R5 zone, you can't do that. You build a house in the front and a smaller one in a smaller detached accessory dwelling in the back, and it would let you just use the property line to have separate ownership of the 2. I don't know if I made that more muddled or less, but the intent is to let you build whatever that base zone allows, but have more flexibility for ownership options. So it's more likely someone will actually preserve that house out front.
So I have a question. Is there anything that makes me keep that house in front after? So I do the lot line adjustment, and I like keeping the house in the back at 20 feet because I'm concerned about the neighbor impact. But I just wonder, can I come back in 3 months and still get rid of the front house?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, unless we put a covenant on. Well,
Yeah, you can't condition a property line adjustment application, so that would be possible. However, we do have something to offer in the next slide that might help address that.
Okay.
Before you go on to the next slide, since I just sat down, my planning hat is just
It's
sort of
still-
kicking in. So so we're in an R5 zone, so presumably we're looking at 5,000 square foot lots. The one to my left, where the red line splits the middle.
2 attached houses. Mm-hmm.
So those are, you could build that in the R5 zone under RIP.
So pretend that lot line is not there.
Which lot line?
The 2 attached houses on the left.
Okay.
Pretend that lot line isn't there. You could build a duplex under residential infill. You could build a 4-plex under residential infill, but it's going to be have that Florida area ratio limit.
Right.
What you passed last time was that lots that had the underlying lot line, all the yellows in our map. Well, no, they weren't yellows.
Right.
They were. You remember?
Yep.
That you wanted to allow them to build a duplex and then confirm a lot line and build 2 attached houses on that lot in the R5 zone without rezoning it to R2.5.
The idea there is basically if you could put 2 units side by side in a duplex configuration and there's already an existing lot line on that property based on the previous platting,
Right.
allow that lot line to be confirmed so that those two halves could be sold independently fee simple, like attached houses.
For the 7,000 that we are allowing, that we're rezoning to R25.
No.
No. For the ones we're not.
Right. So there was 14,000 tax lot, 7,000. Your decision was to rezone 7,000 of them to R2.5.
Right.
Keep the other 7,000 at R5. Allow them to do attached houses, but they would have the Florida area ratio of 0.5, like they regularly do.
Which would be allowed under RIP anyways.
Right, but not as fee simple.
Oh, so we are allowing them to be recognized as fee simple.
Right, so we're allowing them to be on 2,500 square foot lots instead of a duplex on 5,000 square foot lot.
Okay. Got it.
Yeah, it introduces a level of complexity. That's why we were proposing the R2.5 rezoning. So,
yeah,
right? May I recall that? So now what we're
so in that situation, you could also create a flag lot, which is what you're now showing us.
Exactly. So that was our question, and it sounds like Commissioner Spivak's amendment is to, since we're allowing that flag lot configuration with an existing house up front in the R2.5 that's been rezoned, should we allow it also in the R5 that is not being rezoned, but we're allowing the lot line to be confirmed? So I think that's question number one, and I'll just run through the other two questions. The second question is, do we want them to have the same development standards as R2.5? And I'm hearing from Commissioner Spivak that no, that's not his amendment. Okay. So,
My whole intent here is that the development standards are exactly R5.
Okay.
Period. So no, you don't. It's the idea is that from the on the ground, you can't tell the difference between this and any other R5 lot. You can just build the same thing, but if you want to, the one tool you can get from having that historic property line is the ability to bend it around the existing house, so you can have a separate ADU a separate ownership of the ADU. That make sense?
yes.
Okay.
So that is not an amendment. So the amendment is allow the flag lot for R5 lots also.
Right.
And then staff, we identified something, which is the last bullet there that says need to confirm. We recognize that the Florida area ratio on the front lot will frequently be exceeded. And when you do a property line adjustment, staff at BDS will need to review the development standards. And one of those development standards will be Florida area ratio. And the front house will probably be too big for the lot that it's sitting on. So we have a recommendation that that front house be exempt from the Florida area ratio maximums. So to summarize, I think there's two amendments. Do we want to allow the flag lot configurations through a PLA in R5? And then staff's recommendation of exempting the front house from Florida area ratios for the property line adjustment purposes, right? Not indefinitely.
Right. So that's a little bit of the caveat. If you come in and demolish the house, you're going to be subject to the new FAR or the FAR on that site, which is generally going to be less than what you have with the existing house.
Okay. And about how off do you think these houses are going to be? You say they're not going to meet, the front lot isn't going to meet the floor area ratio.
So we did the math on it. So the front lot, if you look at the front lot that has the house on it, it'll be about 40 feet wide by 60 feet deep, because the back lot has to be 40 feet deep. So that's 2,400 square foot lot on the front. And the R5, that would be a 1,200 square foot house.
Okay.
So I think it's a pretty elegant solution. So I support that element of the staff proposal to provide an exemption for the existing house on the property. And I like the fact that that worked for the initial change of ownership to the flag lot, but that it doesn't work for just replacing the front house with a huge one. So I like that.
And what about lot coverage? Will that need a similar exception?
Potentially. That's interesting. The lot coverage you'll get a slight increase because you're going from a 5,000 square foot lot to a 2,500 square foot lot. So it goes from about 45% building coverage or 2,250 square foot building coverage to 50% of building coverage, which is about 1,200 square feet on that front lot. So I don't know enough about how the building coverages work out, whether that would be frequent or not.
So if the theory is we're trying to preserve, we want to create this flag lot, if you preserve the front house, I guess we should be sure we're not, someone wants to do it and needs a little help on lot coverage to do it.
There's always the adjustment process too, through the PLA. So there's regulatory relief if we can't think of all the circumstances. I mean, they could be off on setback, side setbacks. They could be off on a lot of things because that house was built on a 5,000 square foot lot. So there's,
So
many development standards.
Okay, are we ready to move on these? Okay, so can I have a show of cards and verbal comments from people if they're still on the phone on the bending the property line to allow the flag lot to be on the flag lot to exist? Those in favor? Okay. So we have, everyone here was in favor, so that's going to carry. Then the second one, I guess we've already confirmed that the 20-foot isn't an issue, so that's not an amendment. And the question about whether or not we would include an exception for the FAR for the front lot just as part of the code. All those in favor? Okay, so that one's...
I guess I'm not sure if we're giving them an exception for FAR, why don't we just say and an exception for lot coverage? Because they're related, and if we want to allow it, is it creating a new or different issue?
Yeah, I guess I would, I just wonder, imagine that house with the brown roof covering the entire front lot. Is that already, let's say they already are at 0.5 FAR for the full 5,000 square foot lot. That's a 2,500 square foot lot, and that's all they would be allowed to do. Because that's what we're saying is the maximum bulk we want on that site. By dividing off the flag lot, all of a sudden with these amendments, we'd be saying you actually get double on that 50 by 100
because you're
lot.
still limited to.
If we exempt them.
So you're exempting them from the FAR, but not the lot coverage.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. What I think maybe.
This is so random at this point. I'm just.
That's a little bit of my reaction. Is it's an interesting conundrum.
Since you guys haven't had a chance to think it through, I'm not going to push it. But maybe as you're thinking through the final product, since we're not making definitive votes tonight, maybe you could just think through. Yeah, this would work, or yeah, that's a problem. I'll defer to your. Since I don't have the brain power or time to think it through. I'll let you guys decide as you're drafting whether you want to throw it in or not.
Yeah, I think this will be one of those things that we'll have to, like many of these changes, we'll have to really consider and daylight when we come back with the amendments in the fall.
All right. I'm assuming when you come back with actual code language, there'll be a number of these kind of minor or sometimes not so minor points where you will realize we didn't think of something. Or...
Yeah.
Okay, so
we can look forward to that.
So that capture all of 11.4?
That's it for 11.4. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah. So moving on to the tree preservation exemption. So this was Commissioner Houck had introduced an amendment for consideration. Basically, just for a little background, Title 11 is the city's tree code. And for its preservation standard, it requires that you preserve and protect a third of the trees that are 12 inches and larger on a site. So if you have a development site and you're going to show you are retaining the 1/3 of the trees 12 inches and larger, you also have to protect that, which means establishing a root protection zone around the tree. Or if you can't meet that preservation standard, you pay a fee in lieu per tree, and the amount of that is based on the tree size, with an escalating charge the larger the trees get. Currently, lots that are less than 5,000 square feet are exempt from the preservation standard. This was a decision that was made at City Council with the Citywide Tree Project. We had initially gone in with a proposal at a 3,000 square foot lot size exemption, and City Council upped it to less than 5,000 square feet. For planting is required. You plant a mixture or some variety of small, medium, or large canopy trees. The amount of trees is based on how big your site size is. This standard applies to all lots. On lots that are less than 3,000 square feet, those lots can use street trees that they've planted to meet that standard. So the potential amendment here is to reduce the preservation lot size exemption from those that are less than 5,000 square feet to lots that are less than 2,500 square feet. And the image here is just comparing those two lot sizes and the allowable building coverage. And these are to scale. And a little bit of the issue when this first went before council was the potential and practicality of preserving trees on small lots. So that's one consideration. But essentially staff's position on this amendment is it's not been part of our project scope. We've not had conversation with the public about this. It's always been outside of our proposal. So it's not to say that there isn't a room for an amendment like this. It's just better suited for a project that's looking at a more holistic approach to the tree code and changes to the tree code in general, and having a conversation around all those issues together. So,
did you have something, Joe?
No. Commissioner Houck is listening, so I know he's going to want to comment on this once the delay is over.
So, Mike, do you want to weigh in? Does anyone want to make a comment, and we'll just let Mike speak when he catches up?
Comment. Yeah, I'll say something. So we just made some decisions that made more 2,500 square foot lots. So we just decreased our little tree protection.
Okay. Mike?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think he has a delay, so I just texted him.
I'm definitely understanding what staff is saying, and I understand that this is outside the scope of this particular project, but I feel really strongly that City Council provided staff with specific direction to ensure tree protection, and therefore I'm going to stick with the amendment as I proposed it and see how it goes.
That was a little muddled. If you want to try it again. It's a very odd delay. Do you want to try it again?
Oh, that's an idea.
But I think we need to be serious about retaining urban forest canopy. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion about this, but I am going to stick with the amendment as proposed, notwithstanding staff's comments, and see how my fellow commissioners react. At a minimum, I think we have dealt with these issues before that.
So I think what I heard was that despite staff's concerns, he still feels strongly that we need to preserve tree canopy, so he still puts forward his amendment as proposed.
That's what I heard.
Okay. So is there a second to consider this further?
Second.
Okay, so any discussion?
A couple thoughts. One is, I know staff's got this project means pull in all different directions. City Council did include direction when they reviewed the concept draft for this code update to try and include some provisions that would help support tree canopy. And I know it's been a struggle to kind of come up with what those might be. This is one possible strategy. Propose an amendment where the actual proposed draft doesn't include things explicitly to support tree canopy, although some things admittedly do help anyway, just by limiting by FAR, preserving the site coverage area. People are going to tend to build two-story buildings using less of the site coverage allowed. But we're lacking tools in the residential zones to try and preserve those existing trees, and this is one of them. And I think that a huge percentage of the city is in lots that are 5,000 square feet or less. And I think that I'm inclined to try and come up with some way to protect for that public benefit of having tree canopy in those neighborhoods that are predominantly smaller lots. I also have dealt with Title 11. I should refresh my memory on it earlier today. And I've dealt with it much more on larger sites. And I think that the actual code of Title 11, which says you have to preserve 1/3 of the trees on a site, if you have a site with one tree on it and it's 14 inches, then you're going to be subject to this requirement. And on a larger site, you can sort of average things out. As it gets smaller sites, you get more situations where it's harmful for even good actors. There will be an expense if you have a 16-inch tree on the other side of the house from your addition. You may not have, you won't have to pay the fee, but you'll have to pay an arborist to, or you'll have to do tree protection fencing and staking, which costs real money to put up that because this code would apply in those situations. On the other hand, there are also bad actors who will just find a small site, this and take out a tree that doesn't need to be taken out. So I guess I see this as a situation where Title 11 is written in a way that, frankly, I think works better on larger sites. And we're lacking in a good tool that addresses the wide range of situations that happen on a small property. So I'm kind of supporting this as a philosophically wanting to figure out some way we can preserve more trees on small sites, but acknowledging that at the same time that this might limit activity by bad actors, it also is going to have some impact on people who are just trying to do the right things. It'll create some costs in terms of paying for fee and lieu sometimes when a tree's really going to stay anyway, because you don't want to pay all the money to hire an arborist to show that your encroachment's not going to hurt it. And there may be some, and sometimes you'll have to be doing a fair amount of tree protection that where the construction activity is far from where you're actually doing work. So you staff can correct me if I'm getting wrong on the implications of this, but my sense is to support it, but to also note that I wish there were more. I wish that Title 11 were written in a way that worked better, had more discretion in it for smaller properties.
Jeff?
Well, I'll try to take the other side from Eli on this one and support staff that Title 11 is quite controversial. As your representative on the Development Review Committee, it's a constant source of frustration, complaints about added expenses. And I think to sort of throw in at the last minute, well, let's see what happens if we adjust Title 11. I think it's one more instance where we're taking what's already a dramatic change in our zoning code, a controversial change in our zoning code, where we're already struggling with how to implement this RIP concept, and now throw one more controversial log on this fire. I think Eli said it right. We need to try to figure out a way to enhance tree preservation on smaller lots. We haven't figured it out yet, so now we're going to just throw this out because it's sort of a easy code change and say, well, small lot, we want more development on these small lots, here's a new problem that you guys are going to have to figure out, you small developers and builders. It's going to cost you some money. You may have to hire an arborist. You may have to completely redo your plans. It may not even work because of where the tree is located. I think we should be reluctant to sort of add more untested ideas into this RIP. We're already pushing the envelope on a whole new zoning concept, and to take Title 11, which we know is already a contentious set of regulations, and builders tell me it's an expensive set and doesn't always efficiently preserve trees. I think it's a mistake. I think we can't try to solve every piece of residential infill building issues in this package, because it's already a large, complicated, controversial package. And I think adding this is far enough outside the core scope. I think it would be a mistake. I think we should look for another opportunity in the future, or maybe the whichever bureau manages Title 11 can come back to this issue. But I would urge us not to put this into the mix at this late stage.
There are other comments? Well, I'll say one of my new hobbies as a part of this project is wandering into small backyards, and generally with permission. But and I've seen a number of houses backyards where I think this would be a challenge. And so I agree with Jeff. I'd like to see a more comprehensive look taken at it before we impose it. So can we get a show of cards in favor? So we have 2 here, and I believe that's enough.
Well, we'll just do.
Okay, and Mike and Kat?
Well,
No, Mike's
Mike
in
is
favor.
obviously in favor.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Kat, can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, so is that a yes in favor of Mike's amendment?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Can you recap the count for me?
3 to 4.
And am I determining this one? Is that where I'm going with this?
Yeah,
3 to 4.
you are, I believe, Cap.
Okay, this is a tough one for me. I do support what Mike's fighting for here. But I do also, I guess, overall agree that it's more complicated than taking on Title 11 as it is today. So I am very much strongly in support of writing into, so I'd be voting no on this, but writing into a letter, whether it's our primary letter or a secondary letter at some point, but that we need to relook at Title 11 and understand kind of how this is working throughout the city.
Okay. So that's a no.
Thank you.
And just to clarify also how the voting is, there's 8 of you with Mike and Kat on the phone, so it has to have 5 affirmative votes to pass. I mean, granted, we're doing straw votes.
Straw votes.
These are straw votes anyway. But
All right.
Thanks.
Just to add a little, so thanks for the feedback. Just to sort of solidify that position a little bit, there are a number of other outstanding issues with Title 11 that are on a growing list, a hot list. So there is appetite, or at least a need for a look at Title 11. So this is you're not the only vehicle, not that there's a project currently, but there's interest in one. So, okay.
Can I interject here? And I've probably said it before, but I think it's worth repeating. These straw votes, in my mind, particularly like this one, where we're almost deadlocked, I would suggest that when you bring back the final, obviously you need the guidance to draft, but when we finally look at a whole package, I'd like to reserve the right to, particularly on an issue that was 5-3, or that was not a clear consensus, to, in light of the whole package, say, this, whatever the particular issue is, and we'll use Title 11 to say, and looking at the whole package, somebody could certainly say, I'd like to revisit a given issue. And so it's just, I'm not sure how we're do that. It may get too complicated, but I just hate to feel like we've had different straw votes with different people here. A lot of these straw votes have been 2 or 3 or 4 people missing. So I think they're the needed guidance staff needs, but I hope there will be an ability to not be told, well, you voted. You know, you were on a straw vote, and it's sort of a recognition that, though I hope we'll all not try to redo every straw vote, but at least an ability on some of the key ones to come back. So just I will try to do that. So on a few issues.
You are jumping a little ahead to our next step slide, but
okay.
That's,
yeah, I just we
fine.
were talking about straw votes, and this was a close vote.
No, I think that's good. It's good to keep in mind for all the commissioners who are making their straw votes now, is that this is helping shape that revised proposal. But you know, we're making decisions in a very linear fashion on a very organic kind of proposal. So when the organism gets back together, we'll have a chance to relook at all that again.
Which is in 2 weeks. It won't be in the fall, but we can do it in 2 weeks at least. I think a lot of us have forgotten, okay, what did we vote on that first day and how did we land on these things? So in 2 weeks, we'll have just a summary of where we landed on everything. And then we'll go and write the code and come back in the fall.
Yep. So next up is the driveway spacing standard amendment. This is Commissioner Smith. Well, actually, I shouldn't attribute it just to you. Our parking subcommittee was looking at ways to encourage preservation of on-street parking and ways to further retain on-street parking. We kicked around a number of ideas. Many of those were sort of outside of the scope of zoning, but there was one particular approach that may have related to where we place driveways. And so before we get to that, currently driveway curb cut locations, things in the right of way, are regulated by Title 17 and the city engineer. Misuse of the word ensure here, but to ensure the safe and orderly flow of pedestrian, bicycles, and vehicular traffic, and to preserve on-street parking. Title 33 previously had some driveway criteria in its land division criteria, but those were removed in 2009 due to inherent conflicts or disputes, rather, about how Title 33 generally applies to the site and Title 17 generally applies to the right-of-way, and how those two jurisdictions were overlapping and conflicting with each other when we applied those two criteria together. The potential amendment here is to establish a standard within the zoning code of a minimum 22 feet of spacing between driveways, or if that's not met, a maximum distance of 5 feet from the side lot line. So what's really at issue from staff's perspective is, while these numbers, in a zoning standard, you have to come up with clear and objective standards. So that means create a number. And to deviate from the number, you have to go through a land use process and adjustment. So we came up with these numbers with the intent of leaving enough curb space after you took out the wings and driveway width and all that to leave a parking spot along the curb. These numbers work well for 50-foot wide lots. They start to fall apart when you get narrower lots or different lot configurations or lots on a cul-de-sac or whatever. So a little bit of our hesitation is twofold. One, we have a criteria in Title 17 that allows the city engineer to look at retention of on-street parking when they place driveways. And secondly, when we talk about a numerical non-discretionary standard in the zoning code, this is a tough one to address more broadly on different types of lots. So,
Chris.
So I'm going to risk speaking on behalf of my fellow subcommittee members, and if I misrepresent something, I'll count on them to correct me. Going back to the beginning of our discussions, I talked about, what are the neighbors afraid of in RIP, and my answer was 3 things: buildings, people, and cars, right? And this is an attempt to address the cars part of the equation, that with more units, potentially are more driveways, and you chew up the available on-street parking, or you essentially privatize the public on-street parking. It becomes private off-street parking. And the parking subcommittee was looking for ways to limit that effect. A lot of them are outside the realm of Title 33. This look like the one that might fit in Title 33. I'm persuaded by the fact that apparently this has been tried before and failed. I don't feel any need to repeat the experiment. So unless my fellow committee members object, I'm happy to see us skip past this one.
And who are your other committee members?
That was Eli and Mike.
Wait, I'm sorry, what was the tried and failed piece?
Well, so what the staff commentary here says is that we had similar provisions in the zoning code prior to 2009 and removed them because they didn't work. So.
I'm fine having this yanked, too. It's a little different. Other things running through my mind, but I'll leave that off.
Okay.
And Mike?
You know, I don't have it. I have a follow-up on our last discussion when we're ready for it from our remote commissioners. So I just, Kat and Mike wanted to convey that they would hope that at a minimum, the PSC letter to City Council would cover the tree preservation issue that we just talked about, which I think is consistent with the discussion that you had. No comments on the driveway thing.
Okay.
Okay.
So, unless someone else has an issue, we'll move along and they can pull us back if they need to.
That's good. So next up, we are now moving back to our final proposal, which is cottage clusters. And by the time we're done with these amendments, we're probably not going to be calling them cottage clusters, but planned developments.
So why don't we wait? You let Eli.
Yep.
Bow out of this. Is there other stuff going back for next steps after this?
Sorry about that. I should have probably brought that slide forward. So next steps in terms of the PSC and RIP, September 11th, we will come back with a summarized, revised version of the 8-pager. So the summary of your proposals, just sort of the words only. This document, not flush with all the graphics. We will have a new map, but it's just all the proposals as they've been amended. We'll have sort of 2 versions of that, I anticipate. One showing the things that have been deleted, things that have been added, and then we'll show you a sort of clean version that repackages it and makes better sense of all that change. So that will be presented on the 11th. We'll do sort of a similar polling of the commission, make sure that everybody's comfortable with the direction that we've got.
Yeah, and I think we'll talk about how that will go and how we can best manage that meeting and what we want to try to get out of the end of that meeting with officers on Thursday. We'll discuss that and send an email out to everyone.
And from there, we will go and recraft the code and commentary and come back to the commission in the fall for recommendation and vote. So,
all right. So I'll comment. I don't have a live cottage cluster project, but I might in the future. And so in the abundance of caution, I'm going to skip out on this next discussion. But if you want to talk about this thing first.
No, I had a process question, which was, so unfortunately, I can't be here on the 11th. When do you expect to have this summary available for us to take a look at?
We anticipate about a week.
We're hoping for a week. It might be Wednesday.
Okay. I just want to have time to read it and give thoughts, comments.
Yeah.
So in a sense, that'll be the final straw vote.
Right.
Subject to seeing the code that goes with it. Kind of
right.
Thing. Okay.
And it's a little us saying, this is what the straw votes showed.
Right.
Is this what you all understood that you passed? Does this package hold together? Does this still make sense? I don't know if we're going to identify which ones were the closest straw votes or not, because we'll still have to figure that out, and we'll talk to the officers about that on Thursday.
Great.
But we're almost there.
Yeah. Okay. So just a summary of where the staff's proposal was. In the proposed draft, we had a streamlined review process for multiple detached houses, essentially on a lot. Would go from a type 3 to a type 2X review process. There was requirements about orientation of those units around common open space, pedestrian circulation requirements, and this provision to allow one accessory dwelling unit with each house. In other words, twice the allowed density in a current plan development. Just a little background on the difference between land divisions and PDs. So a land division takes one site and creates multiple lots from that. So in this example, we have a 25,000 square foot site in an R5 zone. You divide by 5,000 square feet, it gives you 5 lots, like so. So each of those lots could have a house and an ADU currently. For plan development, it allows greater flexibility to arrange multiple units on a single site. So here's the same site, R5 zone, divided by 5,000 square feet gives you 5 units, not 5 lots. So that looks something like this. And just by virtue of the way the code was constructed, these houses would not be allowed ADUs under our current code. So that was where the proposed change was. This is just showing an example of different types of plan developments. They can be arranged a little around a common area adjacent to some environmental open space. They can be multiple units, like these. The site plan on the right shows 3 duplex units intermixed with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 single detached units around a parking area, private driveway serving those. But the real distinction here is that they all share one piece of property. They're not on individual lots. In terms of what we look at in a discretionary review between a land division, we're looking at service adequacy. Does it have proper stormwater, transportation, sewer? Is the density met? Is tree preservation met? And specifically, are the lot dimension standards being met? For plan developments, it's essentially the same thing, although we replaced lot dimension standard criteria or standards with compatibility with the surrounding area. How does the site lay out? How does it reflect the adjacent neighbors and neighboring development? How does it look at building form and the particular architecture? And does it pick up positive architecture from the surrounding area? So rather than looking at lot dimension standards and ignoring what the future development on those lots would look like, that's land division. Plan developments look at how the whole site gets laid out and what the particular development will look like when it gets built. So the initial proposal, like I mentioned, if you had a 5-lot land division, each of those would have a house and an ADU. Our proposal would have allowed 5 houses, each with an ADU on a planned development site. So for density, the potential amendment is, with some of the changes the Planning and Sustainability Commission has directed us to allow up to a 4-plex on each of these lots. The potential amendment would allow an equivalent number of units that would be allowed through a land division. So sort of following that same intent, if we allow 1 to 4 units on 5 of those lots through a land division, the plan development would allow somewhere between 5 and 20 units on the plan development site. So that's potential amendment number 1.
From Commissioner Schultz, who we've been working with on honing these amendments.
Okay. Kat, did you want to weigh in on that?
Morgan described it quite well. My general comment would be just as, and I think you said it, just trying to level the playing field and make the possibility if you have a large lot that could be subdivided, let it be developed like it would by the base zone.
Any comments, questions on that?
I have a question. I'm just trying to visualize if the mass of allowing 20 units on a 25,000 square foot lot is comparable to the potential of 4 on a 5,000 square foot lot. How would the FAR work?
We'll get to the FAR, and we've thought through that too.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
so a couple ways we could do this.
Let me ask a question or two, and then maybe you can clarify. So to get to 20 units, 4 would have to be affordable.
We have that in here too.
Yeah. So maybe
I guess why not? I'll let you go ahead. I'm just trying to make sure. I mean, I understand the theoretical logic of saying, "Gee, we're allowing 4 units on a 5,000 square foot lot times 5." I'm just not sure if that geometry.
Why don't we run through all of the slides?
Whole package.
Yeah. Okay. And then you can.
Okay, I thought you were stopping.
No, I think you raised an excellent point. So
let's run through all the proposals,
and then we can come back and ask the questions. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Requirements for the additional units. Right now, with the direction we have, when you are doing more than 2 units on a lot, you get to that 3rd unit. One of those units has to be visitable. So the 3rd or the 4th unit one of them has to be visitable. So for the plan development, when we're proposing more than 2 units per each equivalent land division lot, we would require that 1/3 of all the units be visitable. So the example here is that if you had an R5 site that could be divided into 5 lots and 5 duplexes were proposed, no visibility would be required on any of those lots. If you were doing an R5 site and you had some of them triplexes, essentially more than 10 units on the plan development site, 1 out of every 3 of those units would have to meet the visibility standards. So again, the principle here is trying to equate land divisions with the plan development. So that's visitability. Sort of doesn't fit in here, but one of the amendments is to remove the requirement that a certain number of dwelling units be oriented around a common open area. There's already a requirement that you have adequate open area in a plan development, a criterion, but there's no set percentage. So removing this requirement just leaves it more flexible to accommodate more variability, more innovation, more variety. In terms of the review process, where we set that review threshold, in land divisions, you can do up to 10 lots, process as a type 2X review, right? So that's essentially the equivalent of 40 units. In plan developments currently, you're capped at a duplex. Once you get beyond a duplex, it's multi-dwelling development and it triggers a type 3 review. So our proposal was to not count ADUs, allow up to 10 dwelling units, again, sort of making this equivalency with the land division. The potential amendment would be to review the plan development as a type 2X when the equivalent number of units would be allowed through a type 2X land division. So generally that means 40 units. For building coverage, we didn't have a proposal on the table. There was no change to the base zone building coverage standards. This is one of those standards that can be modified through the plan development process. An applicant can propose a certain building coverage through a modification process. The potential amendment, rather, is that we would set a certain building coverage in the plan development process to eliminate the need to request a modification. So this would essentially set a building coverage that was equivalent to lots that are generally within the 5,000 or 7,000 square foot average lot size area. And probably most convoluted is the proposal for a plan development site for R5. It would be the FAR that applied to the base zone. So for staff's proposal, it was 0.5 for R5, 0.7 for R2.5, 0.4 for R7. The PSC introduced a system of graduated FARs based on how many units were on a lot. So if you had a house, it was 1 FAR. If it's a house in an ADU or a duplex, it was slightly bigger. If it was a triplex or a fourplex, it was slightly bigger still. So the potential amendment would be to allow the FAR to match the allowed FAR for an equivalent number of units on a land division site. So, for example, if an R5 site could be divided into 5 lots and 5 units were proposed, the FAR would be 0.5, just like you had 1 unit on each of those 5 lots. If 10 units were proposed, the FAR would be 0.6, and if there were more than 15 units, the FAR would escalate to 0.7, just like it would for an individual lot. So that necessitated this table here. We had to add to that, or incorporate into that, the notion of a bonus. So when you have an affordable, when 1 out of every 4 of the units is affordable to families at 80% MFI, there would be a 0.1 bonus FAR added to that site. And that's that. So there's our overview. I'm sure there are questions. We can either field questions one at a time as we go back through this, or if you have general questions.
And can I recommend, Morgan, that we, if we go back through this, we go them in a little bit different order. We talk about density, we talk about visitability, and then FAR and building coverage, and then do the open area and review process at the end.
Sure.
Because that seems to be, so you can picture in your mind, hopefully, what these developments could look like. But basically what we tried to do with this, well, what the amendments are that we were working with Commissioner Schultz on was to make it equivalent to doing a land division. Plan develop, so you wouldn't have to divide all the lots, but you get the same amount of development, the same number of units, the same number of FAR, but with the same strings attached of visitability and affordability to unlock those extra units or the extra density, the extra FAR. So that's why it's complicated, because the base itself is complicated. But it's parallel.
And if I bought 3 5,000 square foot lots next to each other, I could consolidate the lots and then do this.
Yes.
You could do that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff, did you want to go back to your questions?
Let me ask one quick question, because I forgot this. We did straw vote in favor of the visibility requirement for the third lot, for the third unit on a lot.
Yeah, this was one of those that came up in 2 separate occasions. So the first time was not favored slightly, and the second time it was favored slightly more.
So right now, what you believe your guidance is yes, visibility for the third unit,
right,
and affordability for the fourth unit.
Not required affordability for the fourth unit. It's extra FAR for affordability.
It's required visibility for a third, option for affordability if you want to get to a fourth.
No, fourth by right. Right?
Yeah.
Yep.
You just get a bigger 4. You get a bigger 2, 3, or 4 if you have one of them affordable.
Right. The incentive for the fourth unit was an extra FAR, was not an extra unit. Right. So you can do 1 regular, 2 regular, 3, it needs to be visitable. 4, you can do by right. Only your third one is visitable. Only one of the 4 units. And then if you want to do one of those affordable, you get a bigger size.
So we are allowing 4 by right, subject to visibility on the third.
Correct.
Okay. I'll probably want to revisit that when we get to our actual. But so my question more is just one. I'm having trouble visualizing this. I understand the underlying concept. You have 5 lots. You could potentially get up to 4 each. So now I have 25,000 square foot lot that I'm going to master plan, or I'm going to plan develop.
Mm-hmm. You could do 20 detached.
Does it seem equivalent? I mean, I understand the underlying concept is equivalent, but
this is why
if I'm walking by a cluster development on what's basically a half-acre lot, and I see, what are we up to, 20 units? Is it gonna feel? I mean, I've seen the cluster developments around the city. They're really nice. They've got some open space. They seem to be well thought out, nice architecture. Is that are they gonna look very different, do you think, if now we're bumping up the density like this?
So two things to contemplate. One, I mentioned how we're sort of shifting away from the nomenclature of cottage cluster. And that is, there's not a requirement that all those units be detached. Like, that was sort of the emphasis behind the last proposal. If you do detached, you get ADUs, just like if you had a house, you get an ADU. Now we're talking about numbers of units on a plan development master plan site. That could take a number of different forms. You could do...
This could be one form.
You could do it just like that. You could do 4 or 5 fourplexes, right? You could do a garden apartment with that number of units within that FAR, with the required open space, and meeting all the compatibility requirements. So a little bit of the check and balance on this proposal is it has to go through a discretionary review, meaning you're looking at compatibility with the surrounding neighborhood. Can you accommodate the 20 units on that 25,000 square foot lot? Yeah, you probably could, but it would probably not look like a cottage cluster, right? Once you detach all those units, it really gets hard to lay all that out. But if you start consolidating some of the units together, like we were talking about with fourplexes or some other configuration, it may work.
Can we go back to some of those other examples? So some of the drawings that you have of existing. So you could imagine that some of these structures could have more dwelling units in them.
Right. right?
I mean, because that's kind of what the whole residential info project is really about now, right? It's the structure, size is set, but then within those you can have multiple units. So who's to say that that couldn't accommodate more units, and they would by default be smaller units, but they wouldn't necessarily have to be. I think in our thinking about this, there's so many different configurations that that's part of the reason why we always recommended that there be a plan development land use review process, because we can't think of all the permutations. Nor would we want to codify it. It's something unexpected, I think, for community members, and that warrants a public notice and public participation and a site-specific site planning and elevation drawing, so the members of the public can participate rather than a by right allowance.
This is a little off topic, but are most of these, I'll call them plan development, residential plan development, are they condominiumized?
Yeah, I would say
That's the ownership
by and large.
structure.
I was having a conversation earlier with Commissioner Rudd. There is a potential of doing a plan development with the land division. You can do those two things together.
Lots.
You can create different size lots, smaller lots, but they still have a requirement that they front on some street frontage, either private street or public street. So that's a little bit of when you've got a site that's oddly configured, like the example on the left, when you drop a public street into that site, you've used up a lot of your site area. So typically when you've got sort of those types of constraints, you're going to use this more flexible site layout, do private driveways or pedestrian path connections to your units, and then they're all sharing one property, so then they would be condos versus fee simple lots.
And this goes back to a discussion we sort of killed, but if you have a plan development, is there any reason you couldn't allow fee simple lots to front on a private street?
They could front on a private street. They can front on a shared court
and a common green.
Common green.
Also,
So you could create a fee simple.
Yeah, it's a
development.
little more challenging just based on the utility and infrastructure requirements when you start getting that tight. So it's possible. It just gets more challenging to do that.
Well, ultimately, I agree with Eli. I'd like to see us undo the challenges and make it easier for all these new configurations to be more simply created as fee simple lots rather than condominiums. We had that discussion, so I'll stop it there.
Yeah.
Thank you. That was very helpful. It gives me a comfort level with what you're proposing.
Teresa? So I had a question about the building coverage allowance. And so it's all based on 5,000 square foot lots, because we go from what looks like a lot. 1 acre did have a 15% building coverage allowance, and now it has a 35%.
Yes.
Okay, so it's just assuming everything is a 5,000 square foot lot.
Actually caps out at 7,000 square feet. And I think this was sort of an approach to try to be try to add some element of simplicity in an otherwise complicated proposal. We looked at a number of other cottage cluster precedents, and they ranged between 30 and 35% building coverage.
And I think also when you look at the base building coverage allowances for those lot sizes, generally it was one house per lot. And now with the density allowing for so many more units for a bigger site, if they did, again, with the mindset and the principle of let's try to make it equivalent to a land division, those lots would be smaller lots and their building coverage would go way up in percentage. So a lot more of the site would be covered. And the 35 is a proxy for that.
And can you describe the 2X process?
Well, I'm not sure where you guys ended up with your neighborhood contact requirements. But currently a neighborhood contact is required. Then it is a staff review with appeals that would go to the hearings officer. Yes. Yeah. And
So-
type 3 is a public hearing before the hearings officer with appeals going to city council.
So the director makes the initial decision, and
Correct.
then if someone has a concern with it, they would be able to file an appeal.
Correct.
Right. And like all type 2 reviews, staff receives a proposal. BDS staff sends notice out to property owners for a type 2X, property owners within 150 feet. Is that right? What? I think it's 150 feet. And then members of the public can comment to staff, and they hear that, and then they make their decision, and then that can be appealed. Yeah, so there's opportunity for public input.
Are there any other questions or comments? Katie?
Yeah, I'm just, I feel like I'm the least builder person here. And so I'm just, this might be naive questions, but I mean, if you have a configuration where you have, say, 24 different units that you can have, isn't the builder always going to want to put 24 units on it? So you were saying before that that this is going to be they're going to have to go through a process to get it okay. Am I right in thinking that, or is that not true?
That people will maximize the
that
density?
they'll want to always maximize the number of units.
Depends on the location, the market. Recently we've definitely seen most people maxing out the amount of floor to area ratio and the number of lots. But when the economy was down, people would request, try to get out of building as many units as the city was requiring, even in places where we wanted the density. So I think it fluctuates greatly with the economy and the location of the site. Most of the lots that we have now that are R2.5 currently, like in inner southeast, we have some R2.5 lots. People still are building one house, even though they can build two. And many houses are being built without an ADU, even though people can build an ADU. So I think it
Right, but
varies
this is
quite
a little
bit.
bit different. This seems different than that. Like a different type of builder would be involved in something like this. Does that?
In part, this the plan development process, having that kind of review process will help. Someone trying to develop and sell this product, when you look at the examples that are out there, they don't allow as much density as we're talking about, and they tend to be designed. You're trying to make it attractive to a household that's used to a product that that's a more standard product. So they tend not to be, the big multi-dwelling looking buildings. But who knows? I mean, I guess theoretically it could.
Right, and then the other thing is that how will this be different than multifamily? It wouldn't be very different, would it? Or what should I look for between a cottage cluster and just multifamily development?
Well, the floor to area ratios will be a lot lower because that's how we're structuring the multifamily.
So there'd be less
versus
massing,
less
more
massing
individual.
on the site.
Okay.
It'll be obviously in a different area because single dwellings in a lot larger part of the city than the multi-dwelling, which is concentrated near centers and corridors. What else would
less lot coverage?
Yeah, there's lot coverage, and then with the Better Housing by Design proposed changes, the density is not capped. So you have a certain amount of FAR that's more than the FAR we're talking about, but the number of units can go higher than what we're talking about.
Right.
And just in terms of process, a multi-dwelling proposal in a multi-dwelling zone would be a by right building permit type review.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So this may be a type of product that we don't see very much now if somebody wanted to try to max this out, because it's going to be of the scale of a single dwelling kind of zone, but it's going to have could have many more units in it. And I thought Morgan's example of just sort of thinking about a turn of the century garden kind of development of the lower scale that you see in some of the older residential neighborhoods could be something that comes from this.
Yep.
And
Okay.
so, see, but those are not what you usually see today when you see a multifamily. Those are much bigger buildings.
Right. No. Yeah. Thank you. It was very helpful
Great.
because, yeah, like I said, I'm not a former builder.
Teresa?
Just a question. Parking allowances or restrictions are the same as what?
So the PSC gave us direction previously about removing minimum parking requirements for residential uses in the single dwelling zones. So there would be no minimum required parking. In terms of maximum parking and location, there's some criteria in the plan development that talk about where parking areas need to be located, sort of on the periphery and not like prominent on the street frontage. So, and there's limitations on how much of the paved area between the front building lines and the street, but that's about it.
Okay, so the parking requirements would be in the plan development mode
Review.
versus
Mhm.
the residential mode that we're sort of trying to align all the rest with. So that seems okay?
Yeah, I mean, so subdivision, land division would have, each individual lot wouldn't have required parking, but you could park on it. Plan development wouldn't have required parking, but they could propose parking, and they're going to look at how that parking integrates into the site.
So if you need to put the parking near the visitable unit, that's something the flexibility would allow you to do?
Sure. Yep.
Anyone else? So did you have a suggestion on how to?
Well, if, I just, I have what I could interpret as a moved and second of all the items from Commissioner Schultz and Commissioner Hauk. If you wanted to do it that way, if you want to walk through them individually, if you have questions, you could do it that way. But as a package, Commissioner Schultz and Commissioner Hauk, and they can correct me if I'm wrong about this, I believe could be said to have moved them for your discussion.
This one's... Okay, are people comfortable taking them as a group?
Yeah.
Okay, do you have so we have a...
Yeah, I just for the record, I'm comfortable with, and I guess I'll support the equivalency that's being proposed. And what we're doing with the rest of the code, we should do for the plan developments. But I remain troubled by a couple of things we have done that are now being incorporated. One is what I consider the very small FAR for a 5,000 square foot lot that will limit the size of a single family house to 2,500 square feet. I continue to think that's a mistake. And likewise in the R7, where we're going to limit, even for these bigger lots, we're going to limit house sizes to 2,800 square feet. I think that's a mistake, and it may push me against the whole package. So that said, I realize it's if we're doing it. So I'm okay with equivalency, but just like the whole package and just like with this, that's something I'm ultimately going to be against. And I'm ultimately going to be against throwing in visibility requirements. It seems like a gratuitous sort of, well, let's throw something in if you want to do a triplex or a third unit. So I continue to be against those three. I think they're mistakes. They're mistakes in the big package, and they're mistakes in the equivalent package. But I do support the notion of equivalency. So I'm not sure if that puts me sort of here.
Greener than not.
What?
Greener than
Greener than not. Yeah, I mean, I support going ahead and drafting this as you've done it, and ultimately I'll see if anyone else agrees with me to modify those
things.
Yeah, I think I would like to characterize the direction we get on this package as equivalency with what you would get through a land division. So if things change on the individual lots, we would carry that over.
And that was the spirit that Commissioner Schultz proposed these amendments with, to not penalize someone to do something creative with a site.
Okay, so can we get a show of cards on that? So in favor?
Okay.
So that's everyone here,
unanimous.
and I don't know if you're being texted still.
They moved in second, so I think we're all.
There we go. Next steps. Thank you very much. It's not very like we should probably do a
I
little
know,
applause.
something. Pom-poms.
But it's too late in the evening for that. So next steps, we'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll try to get you some materials in advance of that. We'll talk about what those materials look like with the officers this Thursday. But basically, recapture the direction we've heard so far. Make sure we are all on the same page before we go and try to recodify and remap all of this. So and come back in the fall.
Thank you very much.
Thank
We're
you.
adjourned.
Thank you.